Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. Monday now, the 21st of October, 2024. Quite the weekend we had with Nadine and Oscar. Nadine has now moved inland across Central America and is in the eastern Pacific, where it will become probably a hurricane, and a pretty formidable hurricane at that. We still have Oscar in the Atlantic, and boy, what an interesting feature Oscar was. I got a couple things I want to show you related to that. But first, we're actually going to look at the pattern. We're going to kind of do this backwards. We're going to look at current stuff at the end, because everything actually heads towards there. You'll see. But we're going to look at the pattern that's coming up, because we're going to have to really start to watch the Caribbean, as if we haven't had to. But yes, we're going to have to watch it even closer as we close out the month of October and get into November. Very interesting times ahead still in this remarkable backloaded hurricane season 2024. Thanks for joining me. Let's get started. First, as I said, we'll kind of do it out of order a little bit. Let's look at the ACE, though. This is important. The accumulated cyclone energy, the scoreboard, all the contributing players, so to speak, over here, starting with Alberto down to Oscar. And so our ACE score is now 144.4, and the norm is 122.5. So we are above the long-term average. It is officially an above average season, and I think we're going to add a couple of more here as we get down over the next couple of weeks and maybe even into December, and I'll show you my reason for thinking that. I try to put everything based in some kind of reasoning with background information to back it up, and I will show you that as we go forward, starting with this. This is the reason, for the most part, that we are where we are. A very warm Atlantic basin overall. The La Nina coming on. It's not going to be too long now that it will be officially designated as La Nina. But boy, this very warm Atlantic basin has done its work. We had a 4-week period where there wasn't much and we were all scratching our heads. But ever since then, it has just been one after the other with terrible impacts, as we have seen. And we are not finished yet. A couple things to point out, though. There is the cold wake left over from Kirk and Leslie. And then in the Gulf here, we do see a little bit of the cold wake left by Milton. And now we're really going to have to focus on the Caribbean Sea, where water temperatures, the anomalies here, and that's what we're looking at, by the way. I want to make this very clear. Anomalies, the departure from some kind of a mean or an average here, some kind of a base number. And in this case, it's the base state of the sea surface temperatures. And these colors here, the gradient, you're basically looking at 1 degree Celsius here. These oranges, that's 2 degrees Celsius. That's very, very warm, warmer than average. And that makes a lot of difference when you get all the other ingredients in place. And in fact, that is what helped to contribute to a rapidly intensifying but very small Oscar over in this area. We'll take a look at that more in just a little bit. In the eastern Gulf, finally things are cooling off. This is the wake left over from Milton. The shelf water right up against the coast of Florida now below average. That is great to see. However, South Florida here, not out of the woods. And look, we can still get something that comes up, and this is just purely hypothetical. Yes, you can get something that develops down here, and it can come up and curve through and bring significant impacts. Even with reduced anomalies, water temperature is still close to 80 degrees, and a fast-moving system can still bring impacts. I don't want to make it sound like we're done and there's some kind of a magic fence that's been put up, gates that have closed or anything like that. No, not at all. And in fact, we remember Sandy in 2012. It evolved in the Caribbean and brought substantial impacts as sort of a morphed hybrid hurricane, extratropical, huge superstorm, whatever you want to call it. So I don't want to make it sound like the all clear has been given. At the same time, not wanting to raise unnecessary alarm or anxiety for people, because I certainly realize more than you'll know, because I've done this a long time and I got friends in those areas. I know what they're going through. There is that delicate balance. But we cannot turn our backs on the tropics. We have a lot going on. Something very important is going to be happening 2 weeks from tomorrow. You know what that is. We have a lot of stuff happening, and we just don't want to ignore the tropics and think, well, we're good. It's cold now, crisp air, the Gulf is cooling off, everything's fine. Hopefully it will be, but remember, hope by itself, not a planning tool. So that is why we're here, to keep an eye on things. Not trying to scare people, but we want people to be aware. That is so, so important in everything we do. All right, that out of the way. Let's look at what's happening. Well, we do have the La Nina pretty much. I mean, it's not officially designated yet. That's the Climate Prediction Center's job. But the index values are pretty substantial. There's your zero or your neutral. And clearly we have been below that since the end of July. And here we are right now with the contributor for today, at -1 Celsius in the Nino 3.4 area, what we call the INSA region, basically sitting right out here. This area is about 1 degree Celsius colder than normal. The anomaly there, it's on the cold side. And then pretty much basin-wide here, all across the equatorial region, we are looking at cooler than normal sea surface temperatures. So that's important. Then the MDR, the main development region, still sitting at a respectable 0.73 on the plus side. Look at this. Towards the end of September, we really hit a peak there, well above 1 degree Celsius. Wow, that is really impressive. It is. There's a lot of energy out there across the deep tropics. It's still out there. I showed you the Caribbean anomaly map. Well, this is what it looks like on a chart. And we're looking at 1.2, basically almost 1.3. Luckily, it's come down just a little bit. But the Caribbean still running well above normal here, sea surface temperature-wise. And that helps to explain this. Yeah, the other day, very quickly, Oscar went from nothing, it seemed, just a little puff of clouds. I mean, it was more than that. I'm being facetious. But it really ramped up quickly, became a hurricane, took a lot of people by surprise. I know my friend Craig Setzer, who is one of the meteorologists, the chief meteorologist for Royal Caribbean, I bet they were having some serious, anxiety over that, because you can't be steering cruise ships into hurricanes. And this little one got past us a year after Otis did something very similar, but obviously much more dramatic in the eastern Pacific. A year later, we still haven't caught up. These systems, the global models I do it too. We watch the models. The model doesn't say it's going to do anything. The models are not forecasts. The forecast has to be made by people. Us, me, you, if you want to. Certainly people that work for the National Hurricane Center and the National Weather Service. The models aren't forecast, and even I forget that sometimes. You say, well, the model really doesn't show it, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. Well, we get caught sometimes, and this is definitely one of those times. To make matters more complicated, the rules of the Air Force, from what I understand, do not allow for flying over Cuban airspace, and so we didn't get a good sample of Oscar by the time it made landfall. But this is what it looked like. Pretty amazing here from sunrise to sunset. This is from the University of Wisconsin. The visible and the infrared with all that lightning in there, a very small core. Wow. In 2024, still getting burned by these tropical systems, these little features. That's probably what the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 did. Came along, was a tropical storm near Andros Island and passed through the Keys as a just powerhouse, tiny little Cat 5. Winds pushing 200 miles per hour easily. Lowest pressure ever recorded in the United States. That's how that happens. That's how that happens right there. So anyway, today, Oscar still down there as a tropical storm, kind of getting shredded, decoupled from all the different parts of the atmosphere, the low, the mid, and upper levels. And yet it's still a big rainmaker for sure. And this will head on out. Let's click on it so I can show you the map. It will head out to the northeast, and there'll still be quite a bit of squally weather related to it. So any cruises heading out of Florida here, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, wherever, your cruise corridor through here, they're going to have to be watching all the major lines, not just Royal Caribbean. But really, these do have impacts beyond the obvious. All right, maritime interest, these can be a real headache for sure. So looking at the satellite animation this afternoon, which normally I would do first, like I said, we're starting sort of at the end over here, and we'll get to the beginning. It's like that movie Tenet, where everything went backwards, I guess. Whatever. That was a hard movie to figure out, by the way. But looking at the satellite imagery this afternoon, there's Nadine, which came up fairly quickly, but we had a better handle on it, and it developed and made landfall in here and has worked its way out into the Pacific. And I'm assuming that the low-level center dissipated, mid and upper level energy has hung on, and once it regenerates, and it will, it'll get the next name on the Pacific list, which I will be honest with you, I have no idea what that is. It's been so long since we've had a Pacific storm. Hey, you can look it up. That's all right with me. Leave the answer in the comments, as they say. A lot of YouTubers say that, right? Tell me in the comments what you think. But seriously, this is going to go on. I'll show you in the modeling in a minute to be a pretty strong hurricane. But the good news is, really good news, no Otis this year. Kind of already had that with John that was down here by about the same time that we had, I guess it was Helene. Hard to keep up with all these things. And John was very small, and it flooded Acapulco, if I recall. But anyhow, Nadine, to be whatever it is in the East Pac, will head on out into the open Pacific out here, so no worries for our friends here in Mexico. Meanwhile, there's the cloudiness, showers and thunderstorms, squally weather associated with what's left over from Oscar. And there's yet another tropical wave. Luckily, it's getting sheared there. But all this energy out here, and there's more in the Atlantic, will end up right over here in the Western Caribbean, and that is where we could have some issues down the road. And I can show you that. All right, so let's jump over to the modeling here as we wrap up today's episode. We'll use blue to point stuff out. This is the 12Z run from today. There is Oscar, and there's the vorticity with what was Nadine. And let's just move this out to the next 5 days, all right, because then we need to stop so I can show you some stuff. So watch Oscar. Oscar moves back through the southeast Bahamas. You know, potent enough, certainly squally there for sure. Again, you don't want to go through that in a cruise ship for sure. But then it kind of merges with some other upper level energy and maybe bringing Bermuda, a shot of inclement weather. There's Bermuda right there. And then that goes on out into the Atlantic, and we're at days 4 and 5. So let's stop it right here. A couple things to point out. First, huge area of high pressure sitting over the southeastern United States, so it's going to stay really dry. In fact, it's been anomalously dry ever since Helene in the eastern parts of the southeast U.S., North Carolina, elsewhere, and that is starting to be a problem. We'll address that later. But yeah, the dryness, dry and warm are La Nina signatures, by the way, so that certainly makes sense. So let's come back to this in a minute, though, because now I want to show you this. The old Madden-Julian oscillation. I've seen a lot of people talking about it, and it looks like the amplification of the MJO is going to be substantial. And the MJO basically is a pretty large area of just general favorable conditions, the Madden-Julian oscillation, where at the 200 millibar level, way up in the atmosphere, it allows for the air to rise. A very large area of high pressure at 200 millibars, and we call that forcing. The velocity potential is such that it allows for lots of tropical thunderstorms to develop, and we call that a favorable MJO. And we can track this on various methods. This is one of them. And we can see this is the Euro and the ensembles there, the ensemble mean, forecasting a robust MJO event over the coming days into the phases that favor Western Atlantic development. And this time of year, that generally means the Caribbean Sea. The Euro is on it. The INSEP models, the GFS and its ensembles also, although it's a little slower on the GFS and its related ensembles. The Euro is faster with it. But both of them are in agreement that we get a robust MJO, and that leads me to this. Let's jump over. This is 5 days out. And let's go up and look at that 200 millibar level, and there it is, the beginnings of a stout area of upper level anticyclonic flow. All this sort of base map color down here, yeah, that's very light wind in the upper levels of the atmosphere. Strong wind, there's a trough here. Strong winds, almost like a jet streak cutting to the north. Not conducive, but all this down here, yes, that is conducive. So let's just push this out. One of the rare times that I will show you, because it's worth analyzing. You want to be real careful between showing something without context and analyzing the overall pattern. We stopped at day 5. Let's go on out to day 7. So there's day 7, and I already showed you the pattern. It is going to switch to a more favorable upper level pattern. But now we've got a lot more convergence down here. Big old high pressure sitting up here, and the air starts to pile up down here because of that high pressure. And convergence is where the air comes together And because it can come together at the surface and rise in the upper level, see that? Nice upper level anticyclonic flow all around. You get the ingredients for, if we keep this going, something to try to develop. And that's what happens out to about day 10. And we'll just stop there because that's pretty far out. We can all agree. But we have a huge high pressure area over the Atlantic up here, helping to pile the air up down here. It gets slowed down. It converges. The upper levels are favorable. I've already showed you the water temperatures. So we can all surmise that within about the next 10 days, this is Halloween, October 31st, we should start to see something try to develop in the Western Caribbean. It fits climatology, it fits the pattern, and it fits the year that we have already experienced. So we have to be mindful of this if we are in the Cayman Islands, if we are in Jamaica, if we are in Cuba and Hispaniola and Puerto Rico and the rest of the islands over here, and certainly Central America. We just can't walk away and say, oh, everything's great. Water temperatures are cooling and troughs are coming down. We have snow in the Rockies. It doesn't work that way. Hurricane season and the transition to winter are trying to clash, and it could be very interesting as we get into November. All right? So that's all we got to do. We just got to pay attention. With everything else going on, all the stuff right here on the old phone, even the corner of my eye, I was noticing messages coming in. We are distracted all the time. So we just have to pay attention. You know, something like Oscar, that could have been a lot worse. We're lucky that it wasn't. So with the end of October coming, and as we roll into November, and everything that's going to be important about that first week of November, we do need to pay attention to this quite closely. All right? All right, that is it from me for today. As always, thank you for your time and attention. I hope you learned something. I am Mark Suttoth from all of us at HurricaneTrack. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.